year 2024 successfully ends with the dawning of 2025, we appreciate your efforts in the work we've done together in the African Academy of Languages, ACALAN, in the pursuit of our common objective to develop and promote African languages within the context of the African Union's Language Plan of Action for Africa. We are cognizant of the partnership with the languages inherited from Africa's colonial past: English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish, that have hitherto assumed the function of medium of education, communication, and development in most of Africa. It is now self-evident that Africans' exclusive use of the former colonial languages in their own development will not guarantee knowledge relevant for development to be available and accessible to the vast majority of Africans who majorly use African languages in their daily activities. The use of only these foreign official languages means that available knowledge for development is accessible only to a minority of approximately 40% who have a reasonable level of functional knowledge of these languages. This means that the majority of Africans, about 60%, who use uniquely or essentially an African language, will thus be unwittingly marginalized and excluded in the development process. This is known to have been one of the major factors in the slow pace of realization of development in Africa, especially in terms of the current African Union's Agenda 2063 and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is the situation that the African Union seeks to redress via the instrumentality of the African Academy of Languages, ACALAN, its specialized institution mandated to provide technical support to member states of the African Union to formulate and implement vigorous and articulated language policies and strategies of language development and use to develop and promote African languages as a factor of African integration and development. In the effort to continue fulfilling its mandate, realize its objectives, and provide relevant guidance to policies favorable to the development and promotion of African languages, ACALAN has developed the Dar es Salaam Framework for Action as a collective commitment to action for governments of the member states of the African Union to ensure that Article 25 of the Constitutive Act of the African Union, previously Article 29 of the Charter of the Organization of African Unity, is implemented by promoting Kiswahili as a working language of the African Union and a language of wider communication in Africa, and to promote other regional African languages like Arabic for North Africa, Lingala and Kikongo for Central Africa, Setswana, Chinyanja Chichewa, and isiZulu for Southern Africa, and Fulfulde, Hausa, and Mandenkan for West Africa. This commitment to enact the linguistic expression of the African Union's political will promotes the African identity to enable Africans to make a place for themselves on the world stage. ACALAN officially launched the African Languages Week in Ouagadougou in July 2021 in collaboration with the government of Burkina Faso, following its adoption by the Third Specialized Technical Committee on Youth, Culture and Sports of the African Union in October 2018 in Algiers, Algeria, based on a proposal of the ACALAN Secretariat. The African Languages Week is a recurrent rendezvous and major annual event to be held from 21 to 28 February that will be observed by all member states of the African Union to commemorate the relevance of African languages and cultures in Africa and the African diaspora as a special moment of the African identity and as a pathway of realizing Agenda 2063 of the African Union, especially Aspiration 5, that promotes an Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, shared values and ethics. The African Languages Week aims also to increase awareness and appreciation of African languages by looking at pragmatic ways of empowering and rendering them relevant to the lives of Africans, to promote the dynamics of African worldviews and philosophies of life through the empowerment and the use of African languages, and to demonstrate the indispensable role of African languages in promoting cooperation, integration, and fostering cohesion and sustainable peace and development of Africa. The African Languages Week Coordinating Committee was established by the ACALAN Secretariat as a standing committee with a tenure of 4 years renewable only once. Its main role is to stimulate more dynamism for the development and promotion of African languages across the African continent and in the diaspora by assisting the ACALAN Secretariat in the annual celebration and ensuring the smooth running of the activities of the African Languages Week by proposing the theme for each year and mobilizing resources, human, technical, and financial, for planning. The committee, during its annual technical workshop on December 10 and 11 at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, has identified the theme for the 4th edition of the African Languages Week 2025 as African Languages, Voices for Reparation, Justice, and Dignity for the Africa We Want, reflecting on the African Union's theme for 2025, which is Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through Reparations. The following sub-themes have also been identified. 1. African languages for the restoration of the people of African descent. 2. Breaking the chains of linguistic oppression, reparations, and language empowerment for Africans and the people of African descent. 3. Harnessing African languages for digital inclusion, transformation, and social justice. ACALAN has embarked on a linguistic atlas project whose objectives are to determine precisely the number of African languages, their status, interrelations, and dialectical variations. The continental management structure of the project has been established, including the continental and regional coordinators and the national coordinating committees. The project has now progressed to the map production stage for West and some parts of East Africa. However, maps have been produced for only Malawi and the United Republic of Tanzania due to lack of funds. Over 100 million tons have been harvested and processed for the Kiswahili Corpus Project. www.kiswahili-acalan.org as a component of the African Languages and Cyberspace Program. The Corpus Project is being extended to other vehicular cross-border languages such as Latifa, Chinyanja Chichewa, Fulfulde, Hausa, Kikongo, Mandenkan, Setswana, Lingala, Somali, and Malagasy, which will provide a model for furthering the work across all African languages. To empower African languages more effectively, ACALAN has embarked on projects such as the Pan-African Center for Interpretation and Translation, whose aim is to train Africans in the profession of translation and interpretation to enable African languages to become true working languages and languages of instruction in a multilingual context. The ACALAN Interactive and Comprehensive Platform for African Languages, a radio station, and an online TV platform for African languages, sub-projects of the African Languages and Cyberspace Program to reach rural communities in their languages and promote the use of African languages will be functional in early 2025. The heads of state and government of the member states of the African Union adopt the proposal of the Secretariat of ACALAN to implement a decade of African languages alongside the International Decade of Indigenous Languages of the United Nations 2022-2032 within ACALAN's mandate and programs. During the 5th Mid-Year Coordination Meeting between the African Union, the regional economic communities and regional mechanisms held from July 13 to 16, 2023 in Nairobi, Kenya, we have considered revising the Statute of ACALAN and the Language Plan of Action for Africa for effective implementation and use. Part of our activities has been the continuous harmonization of the writing systems and creation of terminologies for vehicular cross-border languages, which should empower them to assume their role as languages of integration. We will give impetus to research on African languages in collaboration with language research institutions and other institutions such as the media by developing and coordinating research activities on languages and collecting and disseminating the results of linguistic research, archiving documents, and creating data banks relating to African languages. We will continue to be proactive in resource mobilization and put more emphasis on providing technical support to member states to formulate and implement vigorous and articulated language policies. We will collaborate with African regional institutions and organizations in charge of culture and languages to strengthen partnership and complementarity. We will continue to modernize African linguistic tools through the use of information and communication technologies, thus making it possible to effectively bridge the digital divide. We will train teachers in first language methodologies as a factor for promoting the use of African languages as languages of instruction and as official and working languages. We will encourage publication in African languages by instituting and allocating prizes and awards for excellence to persons and organizations contributing to the promotion of African languages. We will continue to implement ACALAN's core projects and transform the priority areas of the Vehicular Cross-Border Language Commissions to enact implementable projects. We will endeavor to implement Assembly Decision EU December 796 on the Dar es Salaam Framework for Action for Kiswahili to effectively become a working language of the African Union and a language of wider communication in Africa, and the African Languages Week. ACALAN has taken the initiative to establish a Continental Youth Committee for the Empowerment of African Languages at the beginning of the new year 2025. The main objective of this committee is to raise awareness among young people of career and entrepreneurship opportunities linked to African languages and digital technologies, and to collaborate with young technology and digital professionals to develop innovative tools and solutions aimed at facilitating the learning and use of African languages in such areas as artificial intelligence, natural language processing, and machine translation. We are urging member states of the African Union to designate national structures to serve as ACALAN's focal institutions in accordance with its statutes. On behalf of Her Excellency Ambassador Mineta Samati Sisuma, Commissioner for Health, Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development of the African Union Commission, we wish to thank you very much for your availability and commitment to the cause of the revalorization, instrumentalization, and development of the use of African languages for inclusive development in Africa in the perspective of the African Union's Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. We invite you all to join this noble cause for African humanity and heritage. The implementation of the African Union's language policy within the context of the Language Plan of Action for Africa will inter alia ensure the democratization of access to knowledge in this age of knowledge economies and digitalization. This will lead to a better appropriation of science and technology, innovation, education and culture as the foundations of the African Union's vision of an innovation-based and knowledge-driven development for Africa's emergence. We are encouraged by the vision of our leaders and look forward to accomplishing and achieving even more with you this year and in the years ahead. The culture of a people is an inevitable factor in their development. The empowerment and effective use of African languages in all domains of life in Africa as a principal pillar of African culture is an indispensable factor to the realization of Agenda 2063 and therefore to African integration and development. African languages are for peaceful, prosperous, integrated and healthy Africa, With all good wishes for a happy, peaceful, prosperous, and healthy New Year 2025, yours faithfully.
Blood. Tell me why we wallow in the mud. Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa, we cry for peace. Africa.